This is my TNA Final Resolution 2010 pay-per-view review. The pay-per-view was live last night, exclusively on pay-per-view. And what I gotta say for this TNA pay-per-view, actually wasn't a bad pay-per-view. Wasn't a great pay-per-view. I would say it was pretty much a solid pay-per-view outing from TNA. It was a average to pretty much almost a good show from TNA, with a few problems I had with it. Mainly the last two matches were the thing that kind of took the pay-per-view down just a little bit, which was Jeff Jarrett versus Samoa Joe. That match just wasn't that good. And the main event, you had Matt Morgan versus Jeff Hardy. I would say it was a little bit better than the match they had at Turning Point, but still is a pretty weak pay-per-view main event right there. And when you got a weak main event, that does kind of take your show down just a little notch right there. They would have had a good, at least a good main event on here, possibly even a great main event, especially if they would have had a great main event with a great match. This could have possibly been in the range of a great pay-per-view from TNA. I think those two things really kind of hurt the pay-per-view right there. And there were a few things that were a little disappointing. I was expecting a little more from, mainly one in particular, Tara versus Mickie James. It was good for what it was, but I was expecting a whole lot more from it. The one match that didn't disappoint at all was Generation Me versus Most Machine Guns and Full Metal Mayhem. Great match, easily the match of the night. And Doug Williams versus AJ Styles was good. And everything else on the pay-per-view, like I said, other than the main event, I would say was the least watchable. Jarrett and Samoa Joe was really the only thing bad on the pay-per-view. Everything else was either great, like the Full Metal Mayhem match, pretty good, like AJ Styles and Doug Williams, or everything else was at least pretty good to, at the worst, watchable. The first matchup was Inc. versus Beer Money for the #1 contendership for the Tag Team Championships. Fairly fun opener, good back and forth action. The crowd was into it. Not much into Inc. But the crowd tends to be into them a lot, so I understand TNA keep on using them. And they did some good stuff in this match with Beer Money. Good back and forth action. Like I said, pretty solid, fun opener. Good way to start the pay-per-view. Beer Money ends up winning the match, becoming the #1 contenders for the Tag Team Championships in about a 2.5-star match. Pretty fun way to start the pay-per-view. The crowd was into the match from start to end, so that's a good way to start the pay-per-view right there. The next matchup was Tara versus Mickie James in a Falls Count Anywhere match. Now, this match right here, compared to the match at Turning Point, I don't know if I'm the only one, but when I was watching it, it didn't really have the full intensity that their match at Turning Point had. Like, their match at Turning Point obviously ended in the no contest. No one won that match. But it seemed like there was more intensity with that match. They really seemed like they hated each other more. In this match, they kind of did that stuff as well. They did, go around the whole entire arena. They were beating the hell out of each other and stuff like that. But I just didn't see the full intensity like I saw at Turning Point, and that kind of hurt it a little bit. And I was expecting a little more from it. The ending kind of, wasn't really a shocker. You knew Madison Rayne was probably going to play a role in the end of the match, helping Tara win. But I think it came out of nowhere and it kind of hurt it. They were battling all over the arena. They went in all the way back to the men's restroom. They went in there. Then Madison Rayne came out there, helped Tara, and Tara wins the match. Mickie James pretty much was knocked out, so Tara wins this match. And I would say about, a 2 1/4-star match. It was okay for what it was, but I was expecting a whole lot more from it. And like I said, it didn't seem like it had the full intensity of the full hatred that they had at Turning Point, which was kind of like, kind of like a downer of this match, especially since this match is supposed to be like, Falls Count Anywhere, anything goes. And, they did some good stuff in here, but I was expecting a little more from it. Then the next matchup was Robbie E versus Jay Lethal for the X Division Championship. This is the match with Cookie in the cage that is suspended above the ring. That part right there, is kind of a stupid thing. It's stuff that, WWF did back in the day with Jerry Lawler. A lot of indie companies did it, indies or little promotions did it in the 1980s. This match was just not that good at all. There's a few things that kind of, took away from it. They did some stupid stuff with Cookie at first. She didn't want to go in the cage, so she went up the stage. She was trying to, go backstage, and you heard Shark Boy's music hit, which actually surprised me, other than maybe a few times where you see him run out there and help some people sometimes. You really were surprised he actually still has a job in TNA, so he pretty much gets her, puts her in a cage, and then Robbie and Jay Lethal had their match. It was watchable at best, I would say. It wasn't that good of an X Division title match right here. And the ending of the match comes when Cookie, she was up, obviously still in the cage above the ring. She threw her shoes into the ring. Robbie tried to use them. The ref got them, stopped them. Then there was the hairspray. Jay Lethal used that, so Jay Lethal got himself disqualified in this match. So Robbie E wins this match via disqualification, but Jay Lethal retains the championship. Then after this match, Cookie gets in the ring. She's pretty much, saying she's great and stuff. Then Shark Boy comes back in the ring, stuns her. Yeah, they're still doing the Stone Cold thing with Shark Boy, and that's the end of that segment right there. Wasn't that it was a watchable X Division title match, but I was expecting a little more from it. At best, I would say 2 stars. The next matchup was Rhino versus RVD in a First Blood match. Now, this match was really surprising. I was actually not expecting much from this, but these two, I know from the past they worked good with each other. But in 2010, I wasn't really expecting much from a Rhino match right here. But Rhino really surprised me here. Really, put a good match together with RVD right here. Him and RVD worked very well with each other. Good back and forth action. And the match comes when RVD hits a trash can, puts it in the corner onto Rhino, goes for the coast to coast, and that's where Rhino gets busted open. So RVD wins this match. And I will say about a 2 3/4 star match. Fairly fun match with these two, really entertaining, whole lot better than I was expecting. Then the next matchup was Doug Williams versus AJ Styles for the TV Championship. This was a good match. You saw some good technical stuff in this match, good mat work, good back and forth action. These two worked very well with each other. Like the ending of this match, I think they did the ending very well, and obviously with the ending of the match, they're probably going to have another match with each other on possibly the next pay-per-view in January. The end of the match comes, I like this one spot at the end where AJ Styles is going for a dive onto Doug Williams from the top rope to the floor. Doug Williams catches him, knocks him into the guardrail, then does the rolling chaos theory onto the floor to AJ Styles. AJ Styles is pretty much knocked out, gets him into the ring, then he taunts the crowd. AJ Styles taunt that he does right before he hits the Styles Clash, then he hits the Styles Clash onto AJ Styles, so he wins this match using AJ Styles' own finishing maneuver. So that right there obviously is foreshadowing that they're obviously going to have another match with each other, which kind of hope they did. This was actually a very good match with them two. I would give it 3 1/4 star. Very fun match with Douglas Williams versus AJ Styles. And I think the ending was good, and obviously they're going to have another match with each other. So good match with Douglas Williams and AJ Styles. So the next matchup was Generation Me versus Moose and Machine Guns for the TNA Tag Team Championship in a Full Metal Mayhem match. This match obviously was not going to disappoint. I don't think anyone was expecting this match to disappoint. Most people going in this pay-per-view knew this match would be the match of the night, and like I said, did not disappoint. And this was the match of the night. A lot of great stuff in here. Good back and forth action. Really good stuff with the ladders in this match from the teams. And just these two have very good chemistry, these two teams. And the ending of the match, they kind of did a thing kind of like the WrestleMania 2000 a la Edge and Christian, where they put a table up onto a number of the ladders and kind of made the thing where they could walk up there and stand on top of the ladders, on top of the table right there. And that was kind of the end of the match right there, where you saw Alex Shelley hit a sliced bread to Jeremy Buck through a table outside the ring. Then Chris Sabin and Max Buck, they were climbing up the ladders, got on top of the table. They both had steel chairs, and they were welding them back at each other. Max Buck through Chris Sabin. He gets the chair, knocks it out of his hand. Then there's a table on the table right in the ring under where they're standing above. Max Buck goes, Jeremy Buck, goes through it, and actually it was Max Buck. Jeremy Buck went through the table with Shelley. Max Buck, he goes through the table, and then Chris Sabin grabs the titles, and that's the end of the match. Very fun match right there with Moose Machine Guns and Generation Me. Easily the match of the night. Like I said, Saban and Shelley retain the championships in about a 4 1/4 star match. Great match. And if there's one match I would say is a must-see match on this pay-per-view, it's easily this match. And the two matches for this are really the matches I would say that are worth going out your way to check out for this pay-per-view. Then the next matchup was Abyss versus the Pope, D'Angelo De Niro, in a casket match. I gotta say, this match was better than their match they had at the Turning Point pay-per-view, so it was a little better than that. Maybe went a little longer than maybe what it should have been, but it was okay for what it was. Then the match comes, you obviously knew the way it was going to go. Abyss hits the chokeslams Pope through into the casket, closed casket, and Abyss wins the match in about a 2-star match. It was okay for what it was. Then the next matchup was Jeff Jarrett versus Samoa Joe in a submission match, and this is one of the problems I really have with TNA is I don't have no problem with them doing a submission match, but the problem is they could just do a submission match, a regular submission match. They don't need to go out there and act like it's a MMA match. They can use MMA elements and stuff like that in professional wrestling, because I think, that does work. But when you're trying to go out there and you're trying to make it look like you're trying to do MMA instead of just using some influence from MMA, it makes yourself look like a joke. And even though you're trying to make your competitor look like a joke, it makes you even look worse right here. And that's the main problem I have with this match. It looked like a complete joke. At least they didn't make it a complete full MMA match where they did like rounds and stuff like that, because that would have made it even look worse. But just wasn't that good at all. And they did wrestling maneuvers in here, which that was one thing I wasn't expecting. I was expecting them just to stick with the whole MMA style, but thankfully they didn't do all that. I was expecting worse, but still, this was the worst match of the night right here. Jeff Jarrett, he ends up winning the match after Samoa Joe taps out in this match from an ankle lock. And like some people already know, it's said that Samoa Joe's last match is this pay-per-view, then he's going to work the TNA tapings this week. At least that's when his contract expires. We don't know. Is he going to re-sign with TNA? The way TNA's been treating him, I kind of hope he doesn't re-sign. Maybe he tries something out with going to WWE, or he goes back, does stuff with the Indies in Japan. But most likely, he probably will re-sign to TNA. So people that are thinking that Samoa Joe is going to leave TNA, don't give your hopes up. It's most likely not going to be happening. I expect him to re-sign to TNA. If he was smart, he wouldn't, just because of the way TNA has been treating him, especially the way they've been booking him this whole entire year. Very, very weak. Easily the worst match of the night right here. I would say probably 1.5 stars at best. I just couldn't get into it, and it was a complete joke. Then the main event was Jeff Hardy versus Matt Morgan with special guest referee Mr. Anderson for the TNA World Heavyweight Championship. And this match was a little bit better than their match they had at Turning Point. Jeff Hardy retains the championship. I don't think anyone was expecting anything other than that right there. The end of the match comes when Anderson, he's out in the ring trying to get Jeff Hardy back into the ring. Eric Bischoff comes out there, throws Anderson into the post and into the ring. Then he's pretty much out of the match. Then they get another referee in there, and that referee pretty much counts it for Jeff Hardy. So Jeff Hardy retains the championship over Matt Morgan. Glad that Jeff Hardy won. I was kind of worried that maybe TNA would have done the route of having Matt Morgan become champion, but glad they didn't do that. And obviously with the Immortals thing, Jeff Hardy needed to stay as TNA champion right here. And like I said, it was better than their match they had at Turning Point, so that's a plus right there. But still, it was a pretty weak main event right here from TNA, and you shouldn't have a weak title match on your pay-per-view, because that's one of the things that's supposed to be your selling point for the pay-per-view. Matt Morgan versus Jeff Hardy going into it, how many people would say, well, Matt Morgan and Jeff Hardy looks like a match that I'm actually going to purchase and want to see. And it was just a very weak title match. And that was really the one thing, that match and the prior match, that kind of took this pay-per-view down a notch right there. If you would have had better matches than those two right there, this would have been a good, probably in the range of a very good to great pay-per-view from TNA. I'll just say it was kind of a above average pay-per-view from TNA. I'm giving a 7 out of 10 just because you had good stuff on this pay-per-view. And really, other than the 2 matches at the end of the pay-per-view. Nothing was too bad, and I'll give the main event probably 2 stars. It was at least watchable. It was okay for what it was. So, like I said, getting the whole overall show a 7 out of 10. You had a great match with Generation Me versus the Motor City Machine Guns. AJ Styles and Douglas Williams had a good TV title match. Rhino versus RBD was actually surprising. I wasn't expecting that. And the matches before that, some of them were at least good, and at the worst, a lot of them were just, a few of them were watchable at best, but really nothing too bad other than Jarrett and Joe. I don't think that came off very well, and the main event was very weak. So that's it for my TNA Final Resolution 2010 pay-per-view review. Peace. This is my TNA Final Resolution 2010 pay-per-view review. The pay-per-view was live last night, exclusively on pay-per-view. And what I gotta say for this TNA pay-per-view, actually wasn't a bad pay-per-view. Wasn't a great pay-per-view. I would say it was pretty much a solid pay-per-view outing from TNA. It was a average to pretty much almost a good show from TNA, with a few problems I had with it. Mainly the last 2 matches were the thing that kind of took the pay-per-view down just a little bit, which was Jeff Jarrett versus Samoa Joe. That match just wasn't that good. And the main event you had, pay-per-view, Bigger Money ends up winning the match, becoming the #1 contenders for the Tag Team Championships in about a 2.5-star match. Pretty fun way to start the pay-per-view. The crowd was into the match from start to end, so that's a good way to start the pay-per-view right there. And the next matchup was Tara versus Mickie James in a Falls Count Anywhere match. Now, this match right here, compared to the match at Turning Point, I don't know if I'm the only one, but when I was watching it, it didn't really have the full intensity that their match at Turning Point had. Like, their match at Turning Point obviously ended in the no-con Metal Mayhem match. Pretty good, like AJ Styles and Doug Williams, or everything else was at least, pretty good to, at the worst, watchable. The first matchup was Inc. versus Beer Money for the #1 contendership for the Tag Team Championships. Fairly fun opener, good back and forth action. The crowd was into it. Not much into Inc. But the crowd tends to be into them a lot. So I understand TNA keep on using them, and they did some good stuff in this match with Beer Money. Good back and forth action. Like I said, pretty solid, fun opener. Good way to start the pay. Matt Morgan versus Jeff Hardy. I would say it was a little bit better than the match they had at Turning Point, but still is a pretty weak pay-per-view main event right there. And when you got a weak main event, that does kind of take your show down just a little notch right there. They would have had a at least a good main event on here, possibly even a great main event, especially if they would have had a great main event with a great match. This could have possibly been in the range of, a great pay-per-view from TNA. I think those 2 things really kind of hurt the pay-per-view right there. And there were a few things that were a little disappointing. I was expecting a little more from, mainly one in particular, Tara versus Mickie James. It was good for what it was, but I was expecting a whole lot more from it. The one match that didn't disappoint at all was Generation Me versus the Motor City Machine Guns and Full Metal Mayhem. Great match, easily the match of the night. And Doug Williams versus AJ Styles was good. And everything else on the pay-per-view, like I said, other than the main event, I would say was the least watchable. Jarrett and Samoa Joe was really the only thing bad on the pay-per-view. Everything else was either, great, like the full